Welcome to Preeminent Test Prep. Today I'll be taking you through the reading section of SAT Practice Test 2. I'll be giving you answer explanations for each question in this reading section as I go through. Now, this video is taken from SAT day 65 out of 90 in our 90-day SAT Prep series. If you want to find our 90-day SAT Prep series, you can find it in our channel. It is a playlist. As I go through, I talk about pacing because this is essentially a walkthrough. I'll be walking through SAT Practice Test 2 as I would if I were taking it myself on the real SAT. So I scored 1590 on the SAT, so as I go through, I'll be kind of giving you a glimpse of how I approach the SAT as I go through, as well as providing those answer explanations for why each answer is correct. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. Any mention that I make towards pacing is because I do treat this like a walkthrough, as if I were taking the SAT reading section myself, like it was a real SAT. So with that, let's go ahead and get started with the passages. All right, so we got the reading sections. We got questions 1 through 10 are based on the following passage. The passage is adopted from Charlotte Bront. It's titled The Professor, originally published in 1857. No man likes to acknowledge that he has made a mistake in the choice of his profession, and every man worthy of name will row long against wind and tide before he allows himself to cry out, I am baffled, and submits to be floated passively back to land. From the first week of my residence in X, I felt my occupation irksome. The thing itself, the work of copying and translating business letters, was a dry and tedious task enough, but had that been all, I should have borne with the nuisance. I am not of an impatient nature, and influenced by the double desire of getting my living and justifying to myself and others the resolution I had taken to become a tradesman. I should have endured in silence the rust and cramp of my best faculties. I should not have whispered, even inwardly, that I longed for liberty. I should not have pent in every sigh by which my heart might have ventured into intimate its distress under the closeness, smoke, monotony, and joyless tumult of Big Ben Close, and its painting desire for freer and fresher scenes. I should have set up the image of duty, the fetish of perseverance, in my small bedroom at Mrs. King's lodgings, and they too should have been my household gods, from which my darling, my cherished in secret, imagination, the tender and the mighty, should never, either by softness or strength, have severed me. But this was not all. The antipathy which had sprung up between myself and my employer, striking deeper root and spreading denser shade daily, excluding me from every glimpse of sunshine of life, and I began to feel like a plant growing in humid darkness out of the slimy walls of a well. Antipathy is the only word which can express the feeling Edward Crimsworth had for me, a feeling in which great measure involuntary and which was liable to be excited by every most trifling moment, look, or word of mine. My southern accent annoyed him, the degree of education evinced in my language irritated him, my punctuality, industry, and accuracy fixed his dislike and gave it the high flavor and poignant relish of envy. He feared that I too should one day become a successful tradesman. Had I been anything inferior to him, he would not have hated me so thoroughly, but I knew all that he knew, and what was worse, he suspected that I kept the padlock of silence on mental wealth in which he was no sharer. If he could have once placed me in a ridiculous or mortifying position, he would have forgiven me much, but I was guarded by three faculties: caution, tact, observation, and prying as was Edward's malignity. It could never baffle the lynx eyes of these, my natural sentinels. Day by day did his malice watch my tact, hoping it would sleep, and prepared to steal snake-like on its slumber. But tact, if it be genuine, never sleeps. I had received my first quarter's wages and was returning to my lodges, possessed heart and soul with the pleasant feeling that the master who had paid me grudged every penny of that hard-earned pittance. I had long ceased to regard Mr. Crimsworth as my brother. He was hard, grinding master. He wished to be an inexorable tyrant, that was all. Thoughts not varied but strong occupied my mind. Two voices spoke within me. Again and again they uttered the same monotonous phrases. One said, William, your life is intolerable. The other said, what can you do to alter it? I walked fast, for it was a cold, frosty night in January. As I approached my lodgings, I turned from a general view of my affairs to the particular speculation as to whether my fire would be out. Looking towards the window of the sitting room, I saw no cheering red gleam. Okay, at this point, that was 3 minutes to read the passage. I'm going to go ahead and answer the questions. I'm just going to go in order here. So we have which choice best summarizes the passage? Well, if we think about the passage as a whole, we're talking about, in the beginning, a character and how he dislikes his job, and then as he goes on, he elaborates on the reasons why. So our answer there would be A, right? He talks about how his employer, Mr. Crimsworth, hates him. He talks about how the job is monotonous, and he talks about the reasons why he does not like this job. That's after he goes on describing it. He considers those reasons why. Okay, the main purpose of the opening sentence in the passage is to do what? Okay, well, when we open up in this passage, what I notice immediately is I notice that he talks about how he doesn't like his profession and that no man ever wants to admit that he chose the wrong profession. And he's talking about how he's baffled. He's talking about how the thing itself is long and boring and that it's a nuisance. He's talking about how he really doesn't like it, and it's giving us insight into how he's thinking. Okay, so the big part here is that it's showing us what he's thinking. Okay, it's not about a controversy, so A is wrong. B, providing context useful in understanding the narrator's emotional state. Absolutely, it's telling us that he's upset with that profession he's chosen, and it's offering that insight into his emotional state. C, offer a symbolic representation of Edward Crimsworth's plight? Absolutely not. D, contrast the narrator's good intentions with his malicious conduct? No. Okay, number 3. We've got, during the course of the first paragraph, the narrator's focus shifts from what? Okay, well, his focus initially is on the general idea of job satisfaction, as I see in C, right? We know in the beginning he's talking about the idea that isn't specific to him. He's just talking no man, right? He's not saying himself likes to acknowledge he chose the wrong profession. Every man worthy of name will go against the current before he cries out that he's baffled, right? Before he cries out, oh, this is the wrong profession. So he's starting out general, and then as he goes on, he starts talking about himself, right? We have I, we have I, we have I. Okay, we see that. We talk about how he should have longed for liberty, all of those things. So he's really talking about his specific case there. Okay, so we're going from generalization about job dissatisfaction to the specifics of his own situation there. So that would be why 3C has to be our answer. As far as A, recollection of past confidence, no, we don't do that. B, reflection on his expectations of life. It's not about life, it's more about his job. And then life as a tradesman to desire for another job. Never says he desires another job. And then D, evaluation of factors making him unhappy. He doesn't start out in that in paragraph 1. Okay, 4, the references to shade and darkness at the end of the first paragraph mainly have which effect? Well, if we think about, we'll go ahead and go there, obviously, because we're told to talk about the shade and darkness. We know that when we go to that in that first paragraph, let's go ahead and find where it's at. I'll put it in blue. So we've got shade and darkness. It's looking like it's towards the end here. Okay, we've got darkness right here, humid darkness out of the slimy walls. He feels like a plant growing in darkness. We see that we have shade, looks like right here. Okay, we have spreading denser shade. So he's really talking about darkness and showing that dismay he has for both this job as well, really as his place in life, his circumstances at home as well. Okay, so we're looking for something that is showing that sense of dismay, right? They evoke the characters or the narrator's sense of dismay. It's not sinister thoughts, it's not fears of confinement, it's not longing for rest. Those are senses of dismay, darkness and dismay. Okay, the passage indicates that Edward Crimsworth's behavior was mainly caused by his what? Well, we know that it talks about how Mr. Crimsworth or Edward Crimsworth thinks that the narrator is superior to him, right? So it's jealousy of that narrator's superiority. Okay, I'll go ahead and quick show you where that is as well. We see that that's right here. We have it was liable at every moment. We have, let's see, I know that there's one spot where it clearly says that. Okay, right here, had I been anything inferior to him. Okay, so obviously then Edward Crimsworth thinks that he is superior, that the narrator is superior to him, thus showing us how D is correct for number 5. 6, the passage indicates that when the narrator began working for Edward Crimsworth, he viewed Crimsworth as a what? Okay, well, we know at first he viewed Crimsworth as a brother, right? We see that it is right here. I long ceased to regard Crimsworth as my brother. So at first he regarded him as a brother. Now in this case, it does not mean that he was actually genetically related. In this case, we're talking about an ally, brother in that sense. So our answer there would be B, not a perceptive judge, not a demanding mentor, not a harmless rival. Next up, we've got question 7. Which choice provides the best evidence for the answer to the previous question? Well, that would be what I just highlighted. Okay, talking about him as a brother, we see that that is going to be in line 61 to 62. So I'm going to go down, find that. I see that's going to be D for number 7. Okay, now I got question 8. Question 8. At the end of the second paragraph, the comparisons of abstract qualities of lynx and a snake mainly have the effect of what? Okay, well, him talking about the lynx and the snake, those are both predators. So it's really showing that relationship between the two and that those are both predators, right? He's really coming after the narrator. Okay, so those two are adversaries. So we're going to look for an answer choice that shows them as being conflicting characters. We have conveying the ferocity of resolution. No. We need them to be conflicting characters, contrasting two hypothetical courses of action. No. Suggesting the likelihood of an altercation. We don't suggest an altercation will occur, but we are illustrating the nature of an adversarial or conflicting relationship. So our answer would be D for number 8. At this point, we have question number 9. The passage indicates that after a long day of work, the narrator sometimes found his living quarters to be what? Okay, treacherous would not be a good answer choice here, just right off the bat. Predictable, also not good. Intolerable, this would be a mistake because you'd be looking too much and looking too narrowly at the word intolerable. Correct answer here would be dreary. Okay, I'm asked for evidence, so I can go ahead and find that for you as well. Okay, that's going to be really where we start talking about, I'll go ahead and find it for you right here. We start talking about how we've got what can you do to alter it? Okay, so we got line 68. We have the other, what can you do to alter it? I walked fast, for it was a cold, frosty night in January. As I approached my lodgings, I turned from a general view of my affairs to the particular speculation as to whether my fire would be out. Looking towards the window of the sitting room, I saw no cheering red gleam. That's showing it's dreary, right? It's not a positive view that he has of his living conditions, right? He views it as dreary. So our answer for 10 then would be D. That supports that it's dreary. At this point now we have passage 2. So I'll switch back to my highlighter and get a read through on this. So this passage is adopted from Lane King, Can Economics Be Ethical? Written in 2013 by Prospect Publishing. We have recent debates about the economy have rediscovered the question, is that right? Where right means more than just profits or efficiency. Some argue that because the free markets allow for personal choice, they are already ethical. Others have accepted the ethical critique and embraced corporate social responsibility, but before we can label any market outcome as immoral or sneer at economists who try to put a price on being ethical, we need to be clear on what we are talking about. Okay, so that's telling me that we're focusing on what we're talking about, what's clear about ethical economics. There are different views on where ethics should apply when someone makes an economic decision. Consider Adam Smith, widely regarded as the modern founder of economics. He was a moral philosopher who believed sympathy for others was the basis for ethics. He would call it empathy nowadays, but one of his key insights in The Wealth of Nations was acting on this empathy could be counterproductive. He observed people becoming better off when they put their own empathy aside and interacted in a self-interested way. Smith justifies selfish behavior by the outcome. Whenever planners use cost-benefit analysis to justify a new railway line, or someone retrains to boost his or her earning power, or a shopper buys one to get one free, they are using the same approach, emphasizing with someone and seeking an outcome that makes the person as well off as possible, although the person they are emphasizing with may be themselves in the future. Instead of judging consequences, Aristotle said ethics was about having the right character. Displaying virtues like courage and honesty is a view put into practice whenever business leaders are chosen for their good character, but is it a hard philosophy to teach? Just how loyalty should you show to a manufacturer that keeps losing money? Show too little and you're agreed it is good corporate rate, or too much and you're wasting money on unproductive capital. Aristotle thought that there was a golden mean between the two extremes and that finding it was a matter of fine judgment. But if ethics is about character, it's not clear what those characteristics should be. Okay, next up we have there is yet another approach. Instead of rooting ethics in character or the consequence of actions, we can focus on the actions themselves. From this perspective, some things are right, some wrong. We should buy fair trade goods. We shouldn't tell lies in advertisements. Ethics becomes a list of commandments, a catalog of do's and don'ts. When a finance official refuses to devalue a currency because they have promised not to, they are defining ethics in this way. According to this approach, devaluation can still be bad, even if it would make everybody better off. Many moral dilemmas arise when these three versions pull in different directions, but clashes are not inevitable. Take fair trade coffee that is sold with a certification that indicates the farmers and workers who produced it were paid a fair wage. For example, buying it might have good consequences, be virtuous, and also be the right thing to do in a flawed market. Common ground like this suggests that even without agreement on where ethics applies, ethical economics is still possible. Whenever we feel queasy about perfect competitive markets, the problem is often rooted in a phony conception of people. The model of a man on which classical economics is based, an entirely rational and selfish being, is a parody, as John Stuart Mill, the philosopher who pioneered the model, accepted. Most people, even economists now, accept that this economic man is a fiction. We behave like a herd. We fear losses more than we hope for gains, and rarely our brains can process all the relevant facts. These human quirks mean we can never make purely rational decisions. A new wave of behavioral economists, aided by neuroscientists, is trying to understand our psychology, both alone and in groups, so they can anticipate our decisions in the marketplace more accurately. But psychology can also help us understand why we react in disgust at economic injustice or accept a moral law as universal, which means that the relatively new science of human behavior might also define economics for us. Ethical economics would then emerge from one of the least likely places, economists themselves. Okay, at this point we got that done in about 3.5 minutes, which is perfectly fine as far as that read through goes. Now we can go ahead and get on to our questions. So question 1, the main purpose of the passage is to do what? Well, as we go through, what we're doing is we're evaluating the different types of ethical economics. So we're going to find an answer choice that says that. Option A says, consider an ethical dilemma posed by cost-benefit analysis. No. Describe a psychology study of ethical economic behavior. No. C, argue free market prohibits ethical economics. No. We are examining the ways of evaluating ethics of economics. We talked about mainly 3 different ways there. Number 12, we have in the passage, the author anticipates which of the following objections criticizing the ethics of free markets. Okay, the objection that we're predicting here is that people say free markets are ethical because they allow individuals to make those choices. Okay, our answer there is going to be D. We're asked for evidence, so I can also go ahead and find you that as well. Okay, we know up top, we pretty much said it right off the bat because we wanted to counter that argument right away. We say some argue that because free markets allow for personal choice, they are already ethical. So our evidence for us addressing that counter argument would be lines 4 to 5. So let's see if we have that as a choice. I would imagine we do, and I see that we do. So our answer for 13 then would be A. At this point, we can go ahead and move on to 14. As used in line 6, embraced most nearly means what? Well, let's go ahead and go to line 6, and we can figure out what embraced most nearly means. So let's go there. We have line 6, the word is embraced. Okay, I'll put it in green so it's easier to see. We have the word embraced. We got others have accepted the ethical critique and embraced corporate social responsibility. Okay, in this case, embraced corporate social responsibility really means that they're accepting this ethical critique, and they are also embracing or being, I'm trying to think of what a good way to say this was. I'd say they're adopting corporate responsibility if that's an option. Let's see if that is an option. Okay, we have option B, readily adopted. Yes, they're taking on that corporate strategy. They're embracing it. They aren't lovingly holding it. That would be not a good way to say this. Eagerly hugging, absolutely not. Reluctantly used, it's not reluctant, so that's why that's wrong as well. So our answer for 14 then must be D, or I'm sorry, must be B. All right, at this point we can go ahead and move on to question 15. The main purpose of the fifth paragraph, lines 45 to 56, is to do what? Well, let's go take a look. Okay, it said 45 to 56. We see that there is yet another approach. Okay, so we're talking about another approach to ethical economics, in this case talking about our actions themselves. So that's really the purpose of that. It's explaining that next approach of ethical economics. Okay, so we're not developing a counter argument, so A is going to be incorrect there. We're not providing support for an idea about economics being about character. We are describing a third approach to defining ethical economics. We're not illustrating one's actions are the result of another person's character either. So our answer there is going to be C. All right, as used in line 58, clashes most nearly means what? Well, let's go take a look. Come up with our own answer choice first so that we are not swayed by the answer choices. So we have many moral dilemmas arise when these three versions pull in different directions, but clashes, okay, I'll put an arrow there so you can see it, are not inevitable. In this case, conflicts between the two. All right, so I'm going to look for an answer choice that says something about conflicts between the two. Okay, I see I have the word conflict, so that right there would be perfect. So my answer for 16 then would be A. We wouldn't say mismatches, collisions, or brawls because none of those mean conflicts between two clashing ideals. All right, now we have 17. Which choice best supports the author's claim that there is common ground shared by the different approaches to ethics described in the passage? Okay, we know that that's going to be where we talk about how, and I'll just go ahead and find it because it's going to be easier to show you that way. It's right around the middle part on our right here. Okay, we talk about how these clashes are not inevitable. Okay, so we were really just there. Okay, we talk about how these moral dilemmas arise. There's three different versions. They pull in different directions, but how these clashes are not inevitable. Okay, at that point, we'd start giving an example. Take fair trade coffee, right? The farmers and the producers are paid a fair wage, and at the same time, buying has good consequences, is virtuous, and is also the right way to act in a flawed market. So I'm going to look then for 59 to 64 as my evidence there, because that's providing an example of how all of those come together, and it's morally correct there. So my answer there would be answer choice C, 59 to 64. Okay, because that's providing our example of how the approaches to ethics can all collide and result in one ethical decision that obeys all of those rules. Now we have 18. The main idea of the final paragraph is that what? Well, let's go take a look at the final paragraph and come up with what the main idea will be. That way we are supporting our answer. Do we have to provide evidence there? We do not. That's okay. So the main idea of the final paragraph is what? Well, let's go take a look. So we talk about the big conclusion here is that the relatively new science of human behavior might also define ethics for us. Ethical economists would then emerge from one of the least likely places, economists ourselves, right? We talk about how no human makes purely rational decisions. So then we're talking about how economists are going to be, looks like the people who solve this problem of ethical economics themselves. So let's go ahead and find an answer choice that says that. We have option A, human quirks make it difficult to predict people's ethical decisions accurately. No. B, people universally react with disgust when faced with economic injustice. No. Option C, understanding human psychology may help to define ethics and economics. Yes, we talk about how they work with neuroscientists as well. Option D says economists themselves will be responsible for reforming the market. No, not themselves, because we talk about how there are human psychologists, right? I'll go back up and show you how we talk about how they are working with neuroscientists here. Okay, neuroscientists. We talk about how they are aided by neuroscientists. Okay, we're talking about how behavioral economists are the ones. Okay, not necessarily just economists, but behavioral economists working with neuroscientists, understanding psychology. Okay, so it's not just economists themselves there. That would be a misconception of that. So it's not going to be answer choice D. It's going to have to be answer choice C for number 18. Okay, at this point we got question 19. We've got we got data in the graph about per pound coffee profits in Tanzania most strongly support which of the following statements. Well, let's go take a look. So we have profits in Tanzania. Okay, I've got regular coffee. I see the profit, right? I've got the amount in U.S. cents per pound. Regular coffee profits compared to fair trade coffees. We see that fair trade coffee is significantly more profitable during all of those years than the regular coffee is. So we have fair trade coffee consistently earned greater profits than regular coffee earned. Absolutely, that's correct according to the data. We don't have to look at B, C, and D. 20, data in the graph indicated the greatest difference between per pound profits between fair trade coffee and regular coffee occurred during which period? At this point, we're just going to go ahead and take a look at the graph, find the difference, where that difference is greatest. I see that that's going to be from right here to right there. That's 2002 to 2004. So my answer there would be answer choice B. So at this point, we go ahead and move on to 21. So 21 Data in the graph provides most direct support for which idea in the passage. Acting on empathy can be counterproductive. No. Ethical economics is defined by character. No. Ethical economics is still possible. Yes, right? We're talking about how ethical economics is still possible, as shown by that graph, because it supports that statement in lines, I believe it was 59 to 64, where we talk about how fair trade coffee is the ethical decision, and all of the economic rules we discussed still would support that fair trade coffee. Okay, so our answer there would be C for 21. At this point, we go ahead and move on to passage 3. Okay, passage 3. We'll go ahead and it's a two-passage one, so we're going to read the first passage, answer the questions on the first passage, then read the second passage, then answer the questions on the second passage, and then after that we'll go ahead and answer the questions on both, because that's the strategy I recommend and that's the strategy I use as well. Okay, so with that, let's go ahead and get started. We have passage 1 is adapted from Nicholas Carr, author Nicholas Carr. The web shatters focus, rewires brains. Copyright 2010 by Condé Nast. Okay, I see my second passage is from Steven Pinker, Mind Over Mass Media. That one's in the New York Times. Okay, but we're focusing on the first one, so we have rewires brains, right? Web shatters focus. Okay, passage 1, the mental consequences of our online info crunching are not universally bad. Certain cognitive skills are strengthened by our use of computers and the net. These tend to involve more primitive mental functions such as hand-eye coordination, reflex response, and the processing of visual cues. One much-cited study of video gaming revealed that after just 10 days of playing action games on computers, a group of young people had significantly boosted the speed with which they could shift their visual focus between various images and tasks. It's likely that web browsing also strengthens brain's functions related to fast-paced problem solving, particularly when it requires spotting patterns in a welter of data. A British study of the way women search for medical information online indicated that an experienced internet user can, at least in some cases, assess the trustworthiness and probable value of a web page in a matter of seconds. The more we practice surfing and scanning, the more adept our brains become at those tasks. But it would be a serious mistake not to look narrowly at such benefits and conclude that the web is making us smarter. In a science article published in early 2009, prominent developmental psychologist Patricia Greenfeld reviewed more than 40 studies of the effects of various types of media on intelligence and learning ability. She concluded that every medium develops some cognitive skills at the expense of others. Our growing use of the net and other screen-based technologies, she wrote, has led to the widespread and sophisticated development of visual spatial skills. But those gains go hand in hand with a weakening of our capacity for the kind of deep processing that underpins mindful knowledge acquisition, inductive analysis, critical thinking, imagination, and reflection. We know that the human brain is highly plastic. Neurons and synapses change as circumstances change. When we adapt to a new cultural phenomenon, including the use of a new medium, we end up with a different brain, says Michael Merzenich, pioneer of the field of neuroplasticity. That means our online habits continue to reverberate in the workings of our brain cells, even when we're not at a computer. We're exercising the neural circuits devoted to skimming and multitasking while ignoring those used for reading and deep thinking. Okay, the author of passage 1 indicates which of the following about the use of screen-based technologies. Well, we know that he's really talking about how screen-based technologies, right? In this case, it doesn't say main focus, so we just have to find which one's true here. As far as it should be thoroughly studied, he doesn't make that claim. It makes brains increasingly rigid, he doesn't make that claim. It has some positive effects, he does make that claim in passage 1. Not that it should be widely encouraged, he does not make that claim either. Which choice provides the best evidence? Okay, best evidence here, that's really going to be in the beginning where we talk about, looks like right here, right? We have certain cognitive skills are strengthened by our use of the computers and the net. So that's in lines 3 to 4. That's showing that there are positive effects there. So I'm going to look for something that says lines 3 to 4. If we have that, I see I do have that as an answer choice. So my answer then would be A for number 23. Next up, I've got question 24. The author of passage 1 indicates that becoming adept at using the internet can do what? Well, we know that in passage 1, he discusses how using the internet is going to make people's skills as far as processing information quicker, but at the same time, it's going to make our ability to think deeply and analyze things as far as a creative way. It's going to make that lessen, right? It's going to undermine that. So we're going to look for an answer choice that says one of those two things. We have option A, make people complacent about their health. No. B, undermine the ability to think deeply. We do make that claim. So our answer there would be B. Okay, not increase people's social contacts, not improve self-confidence. Our answer there would be B. That is the only claim that is supported by the text. As used in line 40, plastic means what? Well, let's go take a look at line 40 and the word plastic. So we know that the human brain is highly plastic. Neurons and synapses change as circumstances change. Okay, so we know in this case plastic is meaning that it is changeable or malleable. I'm looking at either of those as an answer choice. Creative would be an incorrect answer. Same with artificial. Same with malleable. That is correct, right? Malleable means changeable. So our answer there would be C. Sculptural, absolutely not. Okay, answer here is malleable or changeable. Okay, if you don't know what malleable means, basically just means it's changeable. So answer there for 25 would be C. At this point, we go ahead and move on. We got 26. We see it refers to passage 2, so we go read passage 2. Critics of new media sometimes use science itself to press their case, citing research that shows how experience can change the brain, but cognitive neuroscientists roll their eyes at such talk. Yes, every time we learn a fact or skill, the writing of the brain changes. or the wiring of the brain changes. It's not as if the information is stored in the pancreas, but the existence of neuroplasticity does not mean the brain is a blob of clay pounded into shape by experience. Experience does not revamp the basic information processing capacities of the brain. Speed reading programs have long claimed to do just that, but the verdict was rendered by Woody Allen after he read Leo Tolstoy's famously long War and Peace in one sitting. It was about Russia. Genuine multitasking, too, has been exposed as a myth, not just by laboratory studies, but by the familiar sight of an SUV undulating between lanes as the driver cuts deals on his cell phone. Moreover, the effects of experience are highly specific to experience themselves. If you train people to do one thing, recognize shapes, solve math, find hidden words, they get better at doing that thing, but almost nothing else. Music doesn't make you better at math. Conjugating Latin doesn't make you more logical. Brain training games don't make you smarter. Accomplished people don't bulk up their brains with intellectual calisthenics. They immerse themselves in their fields. Novelists read lots of novels. Scientists read lots of science. The effect of consuming electronic media are likely to be far more limited than the panic implies. Media critics write as if the brain takes on the qualities of whatever it consumes, the informational equivalent of you are what you eat. As with ancient people who believed eating fierce animals made them fierce, they assume watching quick cuts and rock videos turns your mental life into quick cuts, or reading bullet points and online posting turns your brain into bullet points and online postings. At this point, we answer questions on passage 2. Passage 2 refers to the novel War and Peace by Woody Allen to suggest what? That he didn't like his writing style? Absolutely not. That's incorrect. Could not comprehend the novel by speed reading it. Yes, right? We talked about how Woody Allen said it was about Russia. Obviously, it's about a lot more than Russia. Obviously, it's showing he cannot comprehend that entire novel, War and Peace, in one sitting by speed reading it. Okay, so our answer there would be answer choice B. At this point, we go ahead and move on. We got question 27. According to the author, passage 2, what do novelists and scientists have in common? Okay, we talk about how they immerse themselves in their fields. Okay, that's pretty much a direct quote. They immerse themselves in their fields, so it's not about taking risks. It's not about them being eager to improve their minds. It's not about them being curious about other subjects, okay? It is about them becoming absorbed in their fields, right? We talk about that. That's pretty much a direct quote of them really immersing themselves in those fields, right? So our answer there would be D for 27. At this point, we move on to 28. We have the analogy in the final sentence of passage 2 has primarily which effect? Well, if we were going to take a look at that, let's go and take a look at the analogy in passage 2. It says it's at the end. Okay, I highlighted that here. We have, as with ancient animals, eating fierce animals makes them fierce. People think that watching quick cuts and rock videos or reading bullet points makes it so your brain can only process those things. Okay, what that's doing is that's criticizing that other group that makes those statements. So criticizing those other people who are maybe neuroscientists or whoever that are making those statements. Where you're really being critical of a particular group, that group that's making those statements. Okay, we're not alluding to the past to evoke a nostalgic response. We're not employing humor. Okay, just soften the severe opinion of human behavior, and we're not using ornate language to illustrate a difficult concept either. We are criticizing that view of that particular group who advocates that sort of approach where you are what you eat, that you are what you eat approach. Okay, at this point we got 29. The main purpose of the passage is to do what? Okay, in this case, each passage, obviously, so we're referring to both passages. Both passages, what are they doing? Well, in this case, both passages, they're making their own argument or making their own case on this subject. Okay, so they're not comparing brain function in those who play games on the internet and those who browse it. Okay, that would be way off topic. That's not even close to the correct answer. B, reporting on the problem-solving skills of individuals with varying levels of internet experience. We don't talk about varying levels of internet experience. Taking a position on increasing financial support. We don't talk about increasing financial support for studies. And then making an argument about the effects of electronic media use on the brain. Yes, that's correct. Both passages make that case there. So now we got question 30. We see we're talking about the relationship between the two passages. What's best describing that relationship between the two? Okay, well, what do we know about passage 1? We know that passage 1 is taking a stance that is contrasted or criticized by passage 2. We know passage 2 really comes at the author of passage 1 saying your conclusions are incorrect. So we're going to look for an answer choice that says that. Passage 2 relates to the first-hand experiences that contrast with the clinical approach in passage 1. No, we don't really have clinical approach in passage 1, so that's wrong. Passage 2 critiques or criticizes the conclusion drawn from the research in passage 1. Yes, okay, we're going straight at that author of passage 1. Passage 2 is saying, nope, you're wrong, you're completely wrong, here's why. Okay, so our answer there would be B. Option C, passage 2 takes a high-level view of a result that passage 1 examines in depth. No. Passage 2 predicts the negative reactions that the findings discussed in passage 1 might produce. We're not predicting any negative reactions. Our answer is B for number 30. At this point, we got question 31. Which of the following points would the authors of both passages most likely agree? Okay, so we got pretty much, we just have to go through here. Okay, there's not really any way to predict this one. So as we go through, we'll just find what one both the authors would agree. Computer-savvy children tend to demonstrate better hand-eye coordination than do their parents. Okay, no, we don't talk about the relationship between kids and their parents here and how that deals with computer savviness. Option B, those who criticize consumers of electronic media tend to overreact in their criticism. We don't talk about the level of their overreaction or underreaction, so that's incorrect. C, improved visual spatial skills do not generalize to improved skills in other areas. Yes, both of them say that doing one thing does not improve your ability to do another. So our answer there would be C for number 31. At this point now we've got question 32. Which choice provides the best evidence that the author of passage 2 would agree to some extent with the claim attributed to Michael Merzinch in lines 41 to 43 of passage 1? Best evidence the author of passage 2 would agree to some extent with that claim. So we got to go find that claim real quick. So that's 41 to 43. So let's go take a look at that. We see that it is when we adapt to a new cultural phenomenon, including the use of a new medium, we end up with a different brain. Okay, obviously passage 2 would agree with that. Okay, in this case we're asked for the evidence. I remember that we say the word, I believe that we say the word yes when we talk about him saying yes. Obviously it changes, so it looks like that was 54. I see I have it highlighted. Yes, every time we learn a fact or skill, the wiring of the brain changes. So he's saying obviously he would agree with that there. So our answer there would be 54 to 56. Okay, so our answer there is going to be B for number 32. At this point, we go ahead and move on. We got our next passage. So we're pretty much doing a good job with pacing. We're taking about 10 minutes per passage, which is perfectly fine. We have questions 33 to 42 are based on the following passage. This passage is adopted from Elizabeth Cady Stanton, her address to the 1869 Women's Suffrage Convention in Washington, D.C. I urge a 16th Amendment because manhood suffrage or a man's government is civil right, religious, social disorganization. The male element is a destructive force, stern, selfish, aggrandizing, loving war, violence, conquest, and acquisition, breeding in the material and the moral world alike discord, disorder, disease, and death. See what a record of blood and cruelty the pages of history reveal, through what slavery, slaughter, and sacrifice, through what inquisitions and imprisonments, pains, and persecutions, black coats, and gloomy creeds, the soul of humanity has struggled for the centuries while mercy has veiled her face, and all hearts have been dead to love and hope. The male element has held high carnival thus far. It has fairly run riot from the beginning, overpowering the feminine element everywhere, crushing out all diviner qualities of human nature until we know but little of true manhood and womanhood, of the latter comparatively nothing, for it has been scarce recognized as power until within the last century. Society is but the reflection of man himself, untempered by women's thought. The hard iron rule we feel like in the church, the state, and the home. No one need wonder at the disorganization, at the fragmentary condition of everything when we remember the man who represents but half a complete being, but half an idea on every subject, has undertaken the absolute control of all sublunary matters. People object to the demands of those whom they choose to call the strong-minded because they say the right of suffrage will make the woman masculine. That is just the difficulty in which we are involved today. Though disenfranchised, we have many women in the best sense, or we have few women in the best sense. We have simply so many reflections, variations, and dilutions of the masculine gender. The strong natural characteristics of womanhood are repressed and ignored in dependence. For so long as man feeds woman, so she will try to please the giver and adapt herself to this condition. To keep a foothold in society, woman must be as near like man as possible, reflect his ideas, opinions, virtues, motives, prejudices, and vices. She must respect his statutes, though they strip her of every inalienable right and conflict with that higher law written by the finger of God on her own soul. Man has been molding woman to his ideas by direct and positive influences, while she, if not a negation, has used indirect means to control him, and in most cases developed the very characteristics both in him and herself that needed repression. And now man himself stands appalled at the results of his own excesses and mourns in bitterness that falsehood, selfishness, and violence are the law of life. The need of this hour is not territory, gold mines, railroads, or specie payments, but a new evangel of womanhood, to exalt purity, virtue, morality, true religion, to lift man up into the higher realms of thought and action. We ask women's enfranchisement as the first step toward the recognition of that essential element in government that can only secure the health, strength, and prosperity of the nation. Whatever is done to lift women to her true position will help to usher in a new day of peace and perfection for the race. And speaking of the masculine element, I do not wish to be understood as saying that all men are hard, selfish, and brutal, for many of the most of the beautiful spirits in the world have been clothed in manhood. But I refer to those characteristics, though often marked in women, that distinguish what is called the stronger sex. For example, the love of acquisition, conquest, very pioneers of civilization, when expended on the earth, the sea, the elements, the riches, the forces of nature, are powers of destruction, when used to subjugate one man to another, or to sacrifice his nations to ambition. Here that great conservator of woman's love, if permitted to assert itself as it would naturally in freedom against oppression, violence, and war, would hold all these destructive forces in check, for woman knows the cost of life better than man does, and not with her consent would one drop of blood ever be shed, one life sacrificed in vain. Okay, the central problem that Stanton describes in the passage is that women have been what? Okay, in this case, we're really talking about how women have not been allowed to exert their positive influence on society and on men in particular. So we're going to look for an answer choice that talks about that. Option A, denied equal educational opportunities. We do not talk about that. We don't talk about equal educational opportunities. Option B, prevented from exerting their positive influence on men, which has led to societal breakdown. Yes, the author talks about societal breakdown in regards to slavery, in regards to politics, in regards to the home life, in regards to war. Okay, she's talking about how women have not been allowed to exert that positive influence on men to prevent those things. Option C, prevented from voting, which has resulted. Okay, she doesn't really talk much about it, right? Obviously, she's arguing for voting, but she's not saying that that's resulted in poor candidates winning important elections. That's not her main argument here. Option D, blocked by men from serving as legislators. Once again, not really her main argument there. All right, Stanton uses the phrase high carnival in line 15, mainly to emphasize what she sees as the what. Okay, in this case, she uses the word high carnival to talk about the utter domination of women by men, and I can go ahead and quick show you that as well in line 15. We say the male element has held high carnival thus far, and it has fairly run riot from the beginning, okay, saying that it's been an absolute disaster having men rule over women with absolute power and utter domination. So our answer would be A for number 34. Okay, now we got question 35. Stanton claims that which of the following was a relatively recent historical development? Well, relatively recent would not be the control of society by men, because she says that that's been going on for a long time. The spread of war and injustice also been going on for a long time. The domination of domestic life by men also, she says, has been going on for a long time. The acknowledgement of women's true character, she says, is a new thing that has emerged in the last century. So for evidence there, we're going to look for where we talk about that new thing in that last century. So let's go ahead and take a look for that. I believe that that's going to be right around oh, I see the word century. Okay, that's a big thing. If you can recognize a word in one of your answer choices off the bat and know that that's where it is, that's where you're going to want to go first. So I see lines 15 to 22. I'll quick take a look. We have them talking about them running riot, right? We talk about how it has scarce been recognized as a power until within the last century. That talking about womanhood, right? Little of true manhood and womanhood, of the latter comparatively nothing, has scarce been recognized until the last century. I see that that ends in line 22, so I'm looking for something right around 15 to 22. As long as we got that, we're good. I see that's answer choice B, so that's perfect. Our answer would be B for 36. Okay, now I got question 37. It says, as used in line 24, rule most nearly means what? Okay, in this case, we're going to want to go there, come up with what it means. We have the word rule. So let's go ahead and find that. We've got, I believe it said it was 27, was the line. Let's go back. So we've got line 20. Okay, line 24 is the word rule. So we have the hard iron rule we feel like in the church, the state, and the home. Okay, in this case, rule, we're talking about that force man has over woman, or that control. Okay, so we have a general guideline. That is not correct. We would not say that. A controlling force, yes. Okay, in this case, rule is talking about men ruling over women in the domestic and social spheres. So our answer there would be B, not an established habit, not a procedural method, but a controlling force in society has been men over women. Okay, that is our best, most nearly means of a rule there. So B would be our answer for 37. Now we got 38. It can be reasonably be inferred that the strong-minded line 32 is generally a term intended to do what? Okay, in this case, obviously I see women in all of these. Okay, it's really used as kind of a diss on women here. It's not used to identify those who demonstrate intellectual skill. We're talking about men who are kind of dissing the women who want the right to vote, not praising women for their fight for long denied rights. We have criticizing women who enter male-dominated professions. We're not talking about male-dominated professions. Answer there would be D, condemning women who agitate for the right to vote for their sex. So our answer there would be D. As used in line 36, best most nearly means what? Well, let's go ahead and take a look then at line 36 and come up with our own answer choice first so that we're not swayed. So we got line 36. We got word best. Though disenfranchised, we have few women in the best sense. Okay, we have simply many reflections and varieties and dilutions of the masculine gender. In this case, we're talking about a pure sense or a genuine sense. So if I have the word pure, I think that would be my best answer choice. If I don't, I'm going to look for something that talks about genuine or true. Okay, I don't have the word pure. I have superior, that's incorrect. Excellent, also incorrect. Rarest, incorrect. Genuine would be my correct answer there. I'm looking for something that's showing that it's the true, pure, or genuine nature. So my answer would be C for 39. Question 40. Stanton contends that the situation she describes in the passage has become so dire that even men have begun to do what? Well, that's going to be talking about how men, okay, and I'm guessing we have evidence for the next one. I see that I do, so I can go ahead and find you that as well. She's really talking about how men now, even at this point, are recognizing that they've kind of messed up, right? They're not doing too hot. So we're talking about their track record, right? So we have, and now man himself stands appalled at the results of his own successes, mourns in bitterness, that falsehood, selfishness, and violence are the law of life. Okay, that's perfect. That's 53 to 55, talking about how man itself has acknowledged he's failing. Okay, so I'm going to look for, that is my evidence. So I'm going to look if we got 53 to 55. I see I do, so my answer there would be B for 41. Okay, as far as the answer to 40, we would be lamenting the problems that the man has created there. Okay, we're talking about how man is now recognizing they've really messed up. They're lamenting those problems they've created. Not joining the call for women's suffrage, not considering women their social equals, and also not asking women how to improve civic life. So our answer would be A for number 40. Okay, so at this point, once again, we are doing pretty good on pace. We got question 42. So question 42 says the sixth paragraph, which is lines 67 to 78, is primarily concerned with establishing a contrast between what? Well, let's go take a look at that paragraph. So we got 67 to 68. What are we contrasting there? Okay, I see that I've got talking about characteristics of manhood. We talk about how though we want to distinguish between the stronger sex. For example, the love of acquisition, conquest, the very pioneers of civilization when expended on earth, the sea, the elements, the rich forces, are powers of destruction when used to subjugate one man, sacrifice nations to ambition. Okay, we're talking about the masculine element here. We go on to say that men can be beautiful spirits of the world, but she's referring to characteristics. So we're really contrasting man himself to the characteristics that are generally associated with man there. So look for an answer choice that says that. We're not contrasting man and women, or the spiritual world and the material world, or bad men and good men. That would be looking too narrow at one sentence there. We're contrasting men and their traits is what we're doing there. So our answer would be D for 42. Okay, answer choice C for 42 would be if you were looking too narrow at about one sentence there where we would talk about good and bad men. Okay, now we're on to passage 5. Okay, we're doing good on time. We're averaging about 10 minutes per passage. So at this point, we're just going to go ahead and keep going. So we got this passage is adopted from Geoffrey Giller, Long a Mystery, How 500-Meter High Undersea Waveforms is Revealed. We got this copyright 2014. This is obviously going to be a science section. Scientific American is where it's published. Some of the largest ocean waves in the world are nearly impossible to see. Unlike other large waves, these rollers, called internal waves, do not ride the ocean surface. Instead, they move underwater, undetectable, without the use of satellite imagery or sophisticated monitoring equipment. Despite their hidden nature, internal waves are fundamental parts of ocean water dynamics, transferring heat to the ocean depths and bringing up colder water from below. They can reach staggering heights, some as tall as skyscrapers. Because these waves are involved in ocean mixing and thus the transfer of heat, understanding them is crucial to global climate modeling, says Tom Peacock, a researcher at MIT. Most models fail to take internal waves into account. If we want to have more and more accurate climate models, we have to be able to capture processes such as these. Peacock and his colleagues tried to do just that. Their study, published in November in Geophysical Research Letters, focused on internal waves generated in the Luzon Strait, which separates Taiwan and the Philippines. Internal waves in this region, thought to be some of the largest in the world, can reach heights of about 500 meters high. That's the same height as the Freedom Tower that's just been built in New York. Although scientists knew of this phenomenon in the South China Sea and beyond, they didn't know how internal waves were formed. To find out, Peacock and a team of researchers from MIT and the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution worked with France's National Center for Scientific Research using a giant facility there called the Coriolis platform. The rotating platform, about 15 meters, 49.2 feet in diameter, turns at variable speeds and can simulate Earth's rotation. It also has walls, which means scientists can fill it with water and create accurate large-scale simulations of various oceanographic scenarios. Peacock and his team built a carbon fiber resin scale model of Luzon Strait, including the islands and surrounding ocean floor topography. They then filled the platform with water of varying salinity to replicate the different densities found at the strait, with denser, saltier water below and lighter, less briny water above. Small particles were added to the solution, illuminated with lights from below in order to track how the liquid moved. Finally, they recreated tides using 2 large plungers to see how internal waves themselves formed. The Luzon Strait's underwater topography, with a distinct double-ridge shape, turns out to be responsible for generating the underwater waves. As the tide rises and falls, the water moves through the strait. Colder and denser water is pushed up over the ridges into warmer, less dense layers above it. This action results in the bumps of colder water trailed by warmer water that generated an internal wave. As these waves move toward land, they become steeper, much the same way waves at the beach become taller before they hit the shore until they break on a continental shelf. The researchers were also able to devise a mathematical model that describes the movement and formation of these waves. Whereas the model is specific to the Luzon Strait, it can still help researchers understand how internal waves are generated in other places around the world. Eventually, this information will be incorporated into global climate models, making them more accurate. It's very clear within the context of these global climate models that internal waves play a role in driving ocean circulations. Okay, at this point, we go ahead and answer our questions. First paragraph serves mainly to do what? Okay, we know in our first paragraph, let me just switch over to my pen here. Okay, we know in our first paragraph that we're really just describing this scientific phenomenon here. So we're talking about how obviously we have large waves. We're describing these internal waves. We're not talking about our study yet, just focusing on describing internal waves there. So I'm looking for an answer choice that talks about that. First paragraph here is mainly option A, explain how a scientific device is used. No. Note a common misconception. No. Describe a natural phenomenon. Yes. Internal waves. And address its importance. Yes, that's what we're doing there. We talk about how its importance being the ability to develop better climate models. Okay, so our answer there would be C. Yeah, so C would be our best answer for 43. 44, as used in line 19, captures most close in meaning to what? Well, let's go take a look in line 19, come up with our best answer choice first. That way we don't get swayed by our answers. So we have to be able to capture processes such as this. In this case, we're talking about these internal waves and capturing these models. Okay, so we want to have more and more climate models. We have to be able to capture processes, the process of generating these internal waves. That would mean recording processes like this, right? Having access to that data, in which case we have to record it because we don't have it yet. So our answer there would be B, we want to record it. That's what that capture means there, not secure and not absorb. Our answer would be B for 44. Now we got 45. According to Peacock, the ability to monitor internal waves is significant primarily because of what? Okay, monitoring these internal waves is significant because it's going to allow us to have better climate models. Okay, that's his main argument here. We need to have this data so we can make better climate models. So we have option D, the study of such waves will inform the development of key scientific models. Yes. I'll go ahead and go over why A through C are wrong real quick. It will allow scientists to verify maximum height of such waves. We never make that argument. B, it will allow researchers to shift their focus to improving the quality of satellite images. We never make that argument. C, the study of wave patterns will enable regions to predict and prevent coastal damage. We never talk about coastal damage, therefore C is incorrect as well. 46, we need evidence there. Okay, that's going to be where we talk about those climate models. I'm going to quick check. Doesn't look like we have the word models anywhere here, so I'm just going to kind of have to go through. I believe it was towards the beginning that we started talking about that, but it also wasn't in like the first couple lines. It's going to be more towards, I might have highlighted it right here, okay? When most models fail to take internal waves into account, if we want to have more and better, I'll put it in blue so you can see, if we want to have more and more accurate climate models, we have to be able to capture processes like these. So that's going to be in lines, looks like 17 to 19 would be what I'm looking at there for my evidence. So let's see if I have that. I see that I do, so my answer then for 46 would be answer choice C. All right, so at this point, we go ahead and move on. We got question 47. We're doing pretty good on time. As using line 65, devise most nearly means what? Okay, at this point, we got to go to line 65 and see what devise most nearly means. Okay, line 65, the researchers were able to devise a mathematical model that describes the movement and formation of these waves. In this case, that means create, because they didn't have one before. So them devising a mathematical model would mean to create a mathematical model. So our answer then would be A for number 47. Okay, now we got question 48. We've got, based on the information in the passage, it can be reasonably inferred that all internal waves, what? So we have option A, reaching approximately the same height, even though the locations and depths vary. No. We know that topography is going to influence this. We have option B, may be caused by similar factors, but are influenced by the distinct topographies of different regions. Yes. Okay, we are asked for evidence in the next question, so I can also go ahead and give you that. That's going to be where we talk about how, towards the end, that model is distinct to that strait, that Luzon Strait, or that Luzon Strait. Okay, so we have the model being specific to the Luzon Strait. It can still help us understand how internal waves are generated in places around the world. Okay, so we want to talk about this mathematical model being specific to that Luzon Strait. We want to talk about how the model is specific to the Luzon Strait, which we do there. It can still help researchers understand how internal waves are generated in places around the world. So I'd be looking right around 65 to 70, as long as I have, I'm going to see what I got as my options real quick. So I'm looking for 65 to 70. I see we don't include 65, but we do have 67 to 70. So right there then for 49, that includes enough of what we need. Okay, 61 to 64 didn't have anything. The other ones aren't either. It's really going to be that 67 to 70 because that talks about that model being specific to the Luzon Strait, which is it because of that distinct topography. Okay, so our answer would be B for 48 and then D for 49. That's the best pair there. So we got, let's see here. So now we've got question 50. So we can go ahead and move on to question 50. Okay, it's going to be about the graph. Isotherm displays an increase in depth below the surface during the period 1912. Which isotherm displays an increase in the depth below the surface during the period 1912 to 2024. So an increase in depth below the surface during 1912 and 2024. All right, we got 1912. We got 2024. Which one shows a decrease? I believe it said there are two with increases, so I'm going to assume it said decrease. I see that that is going to be from my dashed line, which I see is going to be that 13 degrees Celsius. So I'll quick double check it said decrease, and if it did, my answer is going to be 13. I see it does. Oh, it says an increase, which isotherm displays an increase in depth below the surface during the period 1912 to 2024. Increase in depth below the surface. Okay, an increase in depth below the surface in this case is going to be that decreased slope or that downward slope. So our answer there would still be 13 degrees Celsius. So my answer for 50 is going to be D. Okay, now I got question 51. which concept is supported by the passage and by the information in the graph. Okay, I see in my graph, I'm just going to quick take a look at it. I see there's time periods where I see a significant drop in the depth of these temperatures. So I have temperatures that are typically higher dropping down. So we're going to have then the movement of water basically going to a lower depth. Okay, so we have then what is normally warmer water. Okay, this is normally 13 degrees Celsius. Okay, we now only have it being 11 degrees Celsius. So then we have the movement of warmer water down below. Okay, so I'm going to look for something that talks about that. So we have internal waves cause water varying salinity to mix. No. Internal waves push denser water above layers less dense. We want to talk about temperature here. Internal waves push bands of cold water above bands of warmer water. Yes, that would be my correct answer. I'm sorry, no it's not. Okay, that says internal waves push bands of cold water above bands of warmer water. That's not what we're talking about. In this case, that would be a reversed relationship, I believe. We have internal waves are pushing bands of cold water. Let me take a look here. We have internal waves are pushing bands of this warmer water down to where it's normally cold. So that would be a reversed relationship. So answer C is incorrect. And now we've got answer choice D. Internal waves do not rise to break the ocean surface. Yes, okay, we see that we have nowhere do we break the ocean surface up here. Okay, this is the ocean surface, and this blue line going across, we never break that, so our answer then is going to have to be D. Okay, well that's supported by the passage because the passage also says that it's internal waves as well. Now we got 52. How does the graph support the author's point that internal waves affect ocean water dynamics? How does the graph support author's point internal waves affect ocean water dynamics? Okay, this right here is where we're going to talk about that relationship between the two. Okay, we're going to talk about how there's warm water, cold water, and how they have that dip in that graph. So we have option choice A. Option choice A says it demonstrates that wave movement forces warmer water down to depths that are typically colder. Yes, I'll show you why that's correct. It is correct. And I'll go ahead and quick show you that in the graph as well. Okay, we see we have the movement of warmer water, right? 13 degrees Celsius. I'm going to put it in green so you can see it better. We have the movement of this warmer water, this 13 degrees Celsius, down to where normally, and I'll put it in blue, normally we have this 11 degrees Celsius or this colder water. So the movement of warmer water down to the depths where typically colder water is, which is what answer choice A says, warmer water down to the depths that are typically colder. So hopefully this video was helpful. We also have videos on other SAT practice tests. We have videos on all 10 SAT practice tests for the reading section as well as the writing section. So if you want to find those out, you can find those in our channel as well. The reading playlist will also pop up at the end of this video as well. We also have a 90-day SAT prep series out, so if you want to watch that, you can. It's totally free on YouTube. You can find it in our channel under playlists as well. Obviously, these videos take a lot of time and effort, so if you'd like to donate to me, you can. That link will be in the description. As always, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Try to get the word out. I think that this is a great resource. It's a great free resource for people preparing for the SAT, so if you can spread the word, that would be fantastic. As always, thank you for watching, and make sure to have a great day.